And 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Robles, and I will be your instructor for the FMAE Language course. I taught for 12 years at Fountainhead Montessori School in the 3 to 6 year old program, and in the past I have taught the FMAE Movement course as well. This FMAE Language course is going to be a 5-week intensive course, and we will be having a one-time in-person class. Students will be asked to put together their language album, perform observations in classrooms, create their own language material and write-up, and write a rationale. And at the end of the course, there will be a final. So getting into the philosophy of Montessori language. Maria Montessori observed that the child rapidly acquires language from birth until 6 years of age without ever being taught, and she believed that this phenomenon provided evidence for her theory on the absorbent mind. The absorbent mind states that children from birth until 3 unconsciously take in their environment and shape themselves from any information and stimulation they can come into contact with. The child from 3 to 6 years of age is consciously using specific things in his environment to build up his mental and physical faculties. Hence, as linguists today found, language seems to be learned almost intuitively, and the child is born with the instinct to decipher and acquire the language of their culture. Children are able to absorb language from their environment and easily learn how to speak, read, and write if language in its various forms is present in their environment during the period of the absorbent mind. This window of opportunity for learning Maria Montessori called a sensitive period. So language, like vision and most other brain functions, is bounded by a critical period, an early phase in which a child must experience language or else its hardware won't wire up right. The quality and quantity of language is a child is exposed to during the sensitive period directly affects his language skills and brain organization. Therefore, it is critical that parents of young children talk to them often and give them a multitude of vocabulary. The television and tablets is also an unacceptable substitute for giving language because it has been found that language should be connected to emotion, and for a child to acquire the language, they must be spoken to directly. Children's early experiences with language and their environment greatly affect their social, emotional, and intellectual development. Language should begin very early. By just 3 years of age, children are already headed down vastly different paths of verbal achievement as a result of their cumulative experience with language. That was a quote from Eliot. So language in the classroom. Much evidence has been provided for Maria Montessori's theory on the absorbent mind, since it has been observed that children, without ever being taught, seemingly explode into language, reading, and writing. Within the Montessori primary environment, language is given in all areas and throughout the day, enriching the child's vocabulary. This expands his capacity to clearly communicate to others and express himself. Once the child is able to better express himself, his personality begins to truly surface and shine. Language in the Montessori language area is taught with the 3-period lesson. With this lesson, the teacher can evaluate the child's understanding without pressure or stigma, so that his intrinsic motivation is not thwarted. The 3 periods might be thought of as association, recognition, and recall. The adult first states the name of an object. Next, the adult asks the child to hand her or point to the object when she states the name. Lastly, the child is asked when the adult points to a particular object to recall that object's name. If a child cannot complete a certain stage of the lesson, the teacher or guide stops and resumes it from the beginning another day. With this lesson, the teacher or guide is able to see if the child comprehends the if the child comprehends the presentation's concept in language. The child has an urge to learn his language in this particular period because from birth to age 6, he is undergoing a critical period for language acquisition. During this time, the child can learn his language effortlessly and without fatigue. After the age of 6, when the sensitive period has passed, it becomes much more difficult for the child to learn to read and write. Therefore, in the Montessori environment, the child undergoes mastering his language before the elementary years. Okay. And what I also want to get you in on is this. So the child experiences what Montessori called an explosion into reading and writing. Because Montessori comes to understand how the child thinks. And they were thinking, what I can say, I can write. What I can write, I can read. The Montessori environment is rich in verbal and auditory language experience, conversation, books, vocabulary building, songs, poetry, storytelling, and sharing. So yes, the environment plays a huge role in the whole child's education. All aspects of the Montessori environment are indirect preparation for the development of reading and writing. So all the other subjects in the Montessori environment, they all cross each other. So things that are in the sensorial area will help the child in the language area. Things in the art area will help the child in the language area. Practical life works will work for the child in the language area. Okay, so it's all has to do with the indirect approach. Children are in the sensitive period for language, speech, listening, writing, and reading. So from, like we stated before, from the age from birth to age 6, the child is really in the sensitive period for language. So giving them as much nomenclature as you can really helps them. Singing songs to the child, giving stories, telling stories, reading books to them. All of this will engage their mind in learning language. So skill building is accomplished incrementally, step by step, allowing each child as much time and practice as she needs for each step. And you will find in the language area, a lot of the materials are always going to be built off the last thing that you had showed them, but you allow the child as much time as they need to figure out the work and to internalize the work. Children are allowed to discover their own errors either by experimentation or redemonstration by the adult at another time. The adult does not correct specific errors, right? And so as a Montessori teacher guide, our job is not to correct the child so much. We have to let that process come out naturally. And when we do have to step in and help is those points at times when we start seeing the child becoming frustrated with what they're doing. And that could look like a lot of different things for to the child. The child could be can start throwing their pencil on the floor or just start showing up disinterest in what they're doing and getting directed in other things instead of focusing on their work. Okay. So we're going to start off with the middle insets. So the middle inset prepares the hand for writing. Sandpaper letters. They employ a multisensory approach to letter shapes and sounds. Rhyming, phonemic awareness, beginning, middle, and ending sounds of words, and syllabication prepare the child for reading. The movable alphabet allows the child to sound out and build phonetic words. She has the freedom to write whatever she wants and use invented spelling. So these are so now we're going to talk about the scope and sequence. So what is scope and sequence? Well, the scope is the breadth and depth of content to be covered in a curriculum at any one time. For example, a week, a term, a year, over a student's school life. All that you do in a given period. And the sequence. Sequence is the order in which content is presented to learners over time, the order in which you do it. So together, a scope and sequence of learning bring order to the delivery of content, supporting the maximizing of student learning, and offering sustained opportunities for learning. Without a considered scope and sequence, there is the risk of ad hoc content delivery and the missing of significant learning. So without a scope and sequence, there will be a lot of missing content, and we'll be missing out on significant learning. Scope and sequence. Now, what is the scope and sequence in the language area? Well, the scope then we can then identify as the beginning of the curriculum as pre-reading and writing, going all the way through to the end to reading, writing, writing stories, doing what's it called? Going on